Somalia, current economic crisis and how it began. Somalia is classified by the United Nations as a least developed country, which is the lowest classification given to any state, and it does not have a formal economy, so to speak. This is due to there being a lack of government. For many years, civil wars were running rampant throughout the country, and because of this, all economic monitoring systems have effectively been ceased. And also, there are not many accurate statistics on the informal economy that is left, and what little there is comes from outside countries like the United States. This all started with the overthrow of the Beret regime. The Beret regime. Resistance to the Syed Beret regime began during the 1980s, and by 1988 the Somali armed forces began engaging various armed rebel groups, including the Somali Salvation Democratic Front in the northeast, and the Somali National Movement in the northwest, and the United Somali Congress in the south. Clan-based armed opposition groups eventually managed to overthrow the Beret government in 1991. The result of this success was a power vacuum that the armed forces that participated in the overthrow leapt at the chance to fill. Among the effects of the 1990 fighting was the temporary collapse of customary law, and this precipitated the arrival of the UNITAF and the UNOSOM peacekeeping forces, which are branches of the United Task Force led by the United States. However, even after the arrival of these two forces, factional fighting persisted in the South. The absence of a central government, Somalia also began to be characterized as a failed state. The UN withdrew in 1995, having incurred significant casualties, but no central authority had yet been reestablished. After the collapse of the central government, there was some return to customary law as well as religious law in most of the regions. By 1991 through 1998, two autonomous regional governments were established in the northern part of the country, and this led to a relative decrease in the intensity of the fighting. More fighting and instability. Stockholm International Peace Research Institute removed Somalia from its list of major armed conflicts for the years of 1997 and 1998, and the peace was relatively stable until about 2005, when the trend towards reduced conflict halted when fighting erupted in the south. This lasted until 2007. The only upside being the fighting was a much lower scale and intensity than in the early 1990s. And in 2006, the Ethiopian troops seized most of the south from the newly formed Islamic Courts Union, or ICU. The ICU then splintered into more radical groups, notably Al-Shabaab. In October 2011, following preparatory meetings, Kenyan troops entered southern Somalia, Operation Lindanchi, to fight Al-Shabaab and to establish a buffer zone inside Somalia. Kenyan troops were formally integrated into the multinational force in February 2012. International stakeholders and analysts have subsequently begun to describe Somalia as a fragile state as opposed to a failed state, and it is making some progress towards stability. In August of 2014, the Somali government led Operation Indian Ocean, which was launched to clean up the remaining insurgent pockets held throughout the countryside. The fragile state. Somalia in 2014 was raised to the status of fragile state from failed state. This is largely due to outer influence. The African Union just increased its number of forces from 17,000 to 22,000. And it's also had a lot of military support from Kenya and Ethiopia, who trained and provided military support to the government-affiliated militia that is working to expand their government's control outside of the capital, which is really where they had the only place that's really stable in Somalia is directly inside of the capital, and it's due to a large amount of the militia being there. The economy today. Agriculture is the most important economic sector. It accounts for about 65% of the GDP and employs 65% of the workforce. Livestock contributes about 40% to the GDP and more than 50% of export earnings. Other principal exports include fish, charcoal, and bananas, sugar, sorghum, and corn. According to the Central Bank of Somalia, import goods total about 460 million per year and have recovered and even surpassed the aggregate imports prior to the start of the Civil War in 1991. Exports, which total about 270 million annually, have also surpassed pre-war aggregates export levels, but still lead to trade account deficit of about 190 million US dollars per year. However, this trade deficit is far exceeded by money sent to Somalis in the diaspora, which have helped sustain the import levels. The modest industrial sector, based on the processing of agricultural products, accounts for 10% of Somalia's GDP. Prior to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1991, the roughly 53 state-owned small, medium, and large manufacturing firms were floundering, with the ensuing conflict destroying many of the remaining industries. However, primarily as a result of the substantial local investment by the Somali diaspora, many of these small-scale plants have reopened and newer ones have been created, the latter including fish canning and meat processing plants in the north, as well as about 25 factories in Mogadishu area, which manufactures pasta, mineral water, confections, plastic bags, and fabric, as well as detergent, soap, aluminum, foam mattresses, and pillows, fishing boats, carry-out packaging, and stone processing. In 2001, investments in light manufacturing have expanded in Bosaso, Hargeisa, and Mogadishu, in particular indicating growing business confidence in the economy. To this end, in 2004, an 8.3 million Coca-Cola bottling plant opened in Mogadishu, with investors hailing from various constituencies in Somalia. Various other sectors have also attracted foreign investment from the likes of General Motors and Dole Fruit. Analysis. Given the material that I presented, I believe that it is fairly obvious why Somalia's economy is in such poor shape. With a civil war that lasted over a decade and then a lack of a central form of government for many years following, it would be difficult to even maintain, let alone to improve. I believe that now that we are seeing a more stable Somalia, we will start to see involvement outside of military support from other countries. We have already seen the handout model in place, which is a large amount of money given to a country in need. Also, there has been a development for modernization in Somalia, as they have had cell phone companies offering affordable plans to the people, as well as landlines being offered. Last poll showed about 25 landlines per 1,000 people, which is a poor ratio, but they are adding more daily. And the handout model doesn't frequently work because there's no way to ensure that the money is being spent in the right areas. I think that in addition to these things taking place, it is important that human rights are improved. The first thing to go out the window when there is unrest or infighting are human rights, and this is a sure way to decline. If the people aren't happy, then they don't want to work. If there's no work being done, then there can be no economic increase or even maintain the existing economy. And as we know, the economy is the most important thing. Because without a good economy, there's no way to pay for things that a country requires to stay afloat. Once the economy raises, then nets can be put in place to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. I believe that this is going to take generations to take effect. However, if Somalia's new central government holds and they can put an end to all of the infighting, then it should ensure a better Somalia in the future. And I don't believe that Somalia is beyond repair.